Life is complicated, or at least that's how it feels. We fill our days, stretch our limits, chase more, carry more, and then wonder why we end up burned out, stretched thin, and just trying to keep up. But what if the problem isn't life? What if we've just complicated what was never meant to be? This is It's Complicated, a series about cutting through the noise, getting back to what matters most, and rediscovering the simplicity of a life grounded in faith, family, and purpose. Each episode, I'll take one area of life that feels tangled, expose the lie that's keeping it that way, and bring it back to truth. Because clarity brings peace. And maybe, just maybe, it doesn't have to be complicated. Let's get into it. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Coffee with Phil. Welcome to my studio. Welcome to my afternoon. And am I having a good one? Yes, I am. And I wonder how you're doing. Welcome to the series. It's complicated. As you would have heard, there's different areas of our lives that we're going to focus on. And today, I'm going to speak about family. And there are a couple more confessions in this session. And if you listen to the last episode, you would have heard a pretty not so good confession. Kathy came home after listening to the podcast in the car and was like, what the heck? Anyway, you can listen to that in episode 163, the most recent one on the channel. But here we are in episode 164. I'm enjoying this afternoon at the end of my day a lovely French Earl Grey tea. But I would always recommend that you fill your day with good coffee. I had a couple of good coffees start of the day, but do you know what? Here's another confession. Oh, here we go. The coffee I had this afternoon was just a little bit rank. And I don't know what I was doing, how distracted I was. I can't even remember what the pour, the extraction was like. It had good crema. From memory, it probably poured a bit fast. That might be the answer. But, it was just inconsistent. I've got an inconsistent grind going on right now. These are the dramas, friends, that I have to suffer through in my world. But anyway, I encourage you to, wherever you are, to drink good coffee. Enjoy good coffee. Life's too short to have bad coffee. And I suppose one of the reasons that I began by calling this podcast years ago, called it Coffee with Phil, was that we would just get together over a coffee. We would share life. We would share our journey of faith, that our faith would become real through the conversations, the meaningful conversations we have with each other. And that coffee would be the conduit, the elixir, the lubricant, the oil that greases the wheels of relationship. So, with that in mind, let's get into the conversation today, because I've got some notes here that does include my confessions. So, Coffee with Phil, episode 164. It's complicated, friends. Life is complicated because we make it complicated. And I would say that life's as complicated as we choose to make it. And I want you to take responsibility here. I don't want you to abdicate. I don't want you to blame. Don't want you to deflect. Because the truth is, when you don't think about life, when you don't think about your family with intentionality, you absolutely default to making things complicated. And I have got a couple of confessions around this coming shortly. Before I do that, I always like to begin the thought process with perhaps identifying what I call problem statements. So this is just an old communication technique. It's actually also a sales technique. When you're trying to convey a message, then at the beginning, what you want to do is just really identify what the potential problems for the listener are, or the prospect in the case of sales, and help them to sit in the uncomfortable space of a problem, making it their own. And then, of course, whether you're communicating, preaching, or selling, you want to present the pathway toward the solution. And so here you go. I'm just revealing all here, but here we go. Let's look at problem statements. And I'd have to say to you, the first one is that busyness replaces presence. And look, I don't have young kids anymore, but I think this statement would still apply. The old parenting seminars 25, 50 years ago used to say that love, when it comes to a child, love was spelt T-I-M-E. They want your presence. They want your focus. They want to see you connecting with them at their level. That is not about creating needs-based dependency, but it is about communicating your love and commitment through your connection and your time. I'd also say this: avoidance, absence, or attention deficit disorder are also problems. And I guess the second of my confessions that I'll share shortly, out of sight, out of mind. And that's what can make family more challenging as all of us grow older and as we get busy, we have lives and families of our own. And in my case, geographically separated family makes family complicated. And it makes the excuses easy, the challenge more difficult, but nonetheless, the desire should be that family is as God intended. And perhaps I'll share a little bit about that near the end. The third and final problem statement. Look, let me just reiterate. Here's another communication technique. Always have 3 points. Always reinforce them. So the first one was that busyness replaces presence. The second problem we have is avoidance, absence, or attention deficit disorder. And the third problem, here we go, unspoken expectations that are healthy or driven by healthy need. So one of the biggest problems in relationships, particularly in families, is unspoken expectations. I'm judging you. I'm feeling sorry for myself, and so I'm projecting judgment toward you because you let me down in a way that was important to me, even though I didn't tell you about it. Well, that's passive-aggressive, isn't it? But the point is, it happens all the time. We feel hurt by family. They're the ones that are closest to us, and we feel that they hurt us when they didn't meet our deepest need, which they're supposed to do because they're our family. Problem is, we didn't tell them what we were feeling, and we didn't tell them what we were needing, and we didn't do it with a healthy motive. So those are problems, and I share those, I guess, just to get you to check back in on your own family, check in on your own situation. And so when I say family, obviously we've got circles within circles. We've got our most immediate family, those that are direct blood relatives. So that would be our parents and our grandparents. It would include our siblings. It would include the children of our siblings. Those are what I would call direct family. We've got the next concentric circle, which would be people that are extremely close to us. These are the friends that know everything. These might be some people in your church or your home group. It could be friends that you've journeyed with a very, very long time, or someone that you see as a role model, a father figure, or a mentor. They would be someone that I'd consider family also. So think about where you're directing your attention, because what I'm saying is the problem is family is complicated. It's complicated because we don't give it attention. We are not intentional, and therefore by default we trip ourselves up when we make family complicated. It doesn't generate the fruit in our lives that God intended, and therefore we miss the mark. So don't make family complicated. Here's the thing, guys. Hang on. I'm going to pause. I need a cup of tea. And then I'm going to come back with a really, really important key statement for you. Here I am back again. That was good. Thank you for being patient. Thank you for waiting for me. Here's the key statement I was building up to. It is my experience that the devil will attack family. And he'll use you to do it. I bet you didn't expect that. Now, look, here's the thing, and this is my experience. This wasn't one of my confessions, but now it becomes a precursor to my confessions. I was having a chat with a mentor friend of mine several years ago, and we were promoting the culture of family within the faith community that I was part of leading, and it was just, there were some real challenges. And this mentor friend of mine, he said, the thing that you hold up as a banner, the thing that you wave is something important, the devil's going to attack that. And I really felt like it was true. But then what I experienced was that those attacks came through me. And it wasn't because I wasn't committed or passionate about protecting the family. It was just I was ill-prepared and somewhat distracted and not intentional. So we're going to fix all those things today as we work through it. So I would say to you, make this your creed, make it a motto, choose whether you want to make it as important as enough to be like a value statement for you. Kathy and I decided a long time ago that family was one of the key foundation stones for our family value system. And in fact, if you go back to last week's episode 163, and I talk about finances and what values drive your financial decisions, one of the core foundation stones for Kathy and I was family, and in fact, it was driving our financial decisions. So I would say to you that it's my experience that the devil will attack family and the ethos and the value of family, and he's probably going to use you to do it. So be very intentional to fight for your family and make it part of your fabric. Okay, now let me get on to confession number 1. There was a time in my life particular season where things were going quite well business-wise, multiple businesses doing very well. Let's just say they were generating a lot of enjoyment or fruitful enjoyment for the family. They had the finer things that they wanted, and I was pretty busy, and I was juggling a lot of things, I was doing a lot of work, and I wasn't around a lot. And that allowed cracks to come into our family, which allowed the devil to attack our family through me. Like I said, I'm the problem here. And I remember Kathy and I had a rather important, but let's just say it was pretty intense. We had a conversation about why and how we thought things were falling down. And I remember saying to her, like, do you not understand how important you are? And can you not see that everything I'm doing, I'm building it for our family? Can you not see that? And Kathy was quite, she was remarkably relaxed and careful in how she said the next statement that she said, but she said, we can't see that because we don't see you. And it just sat me on my bum, and it made me reflect and realize that all my good intentions and all my hard effort was of absolute no value if I had no connection with my family. If I had no relationship with my family, what was I building for? And so that really led to a reset for us. And a reset, Kathy and I, we restructured a whole lot of things. We made some significant decisions, and it made us really sit down and choose to intentionally decide together how we were going to invest in our family. And I would say to you this, making a choice to invest in family will cost you in many ways, but a good investment always does. And I don't want to, I really haven't got the time to dive deep into this now, but I wrote a book years ago. Where's the publish date? 2019 I published this, but I first wrote it in 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. It's called Building a Strong Family. And if you just go to strongfamily.co.nz, it will currently, hopefully, at the time of recording this, it will point you to the right place to see it. Website feelstrong.com. When that's working, you should find it there also. This one is also on Amazon. I don't want to dive too deep here, but I do want to expound to you and express to you how brilliant I think the content of this book is, and it's Holy Spirit inspired, because I'm not clever enough to do most of this stuff. But I want to read to you some of the headings of the chapters, because I felt the Lord say to me, write stories from a very, very honest position and share how you and Kathy intentionally build your family into a strong family. And so, chapter number 1 is called How to Have the Courage to Leap Out of the Box Called Normal. Chapter 2, Help Your Family to Be Proud of Their Identity. Number 7, Show Your Family How They Can Surpass Personal Boundaries. Chapter 10, The City of Tears. It was about when we're in Paris and how God astounded me with his love in so many different ways. Chapter 11, there's a very good story there. In chapter 11, Jackson and I walking, and the chapter heading is Teach Your Family to Grow in Faith and Walk Out That Faith. And the story is quite powerful. Number 14, Allow Your Family to Learn the Consequences of Choice. And the final chapter, 15, Together We Are Much, Much Stronger. So those are headings that I would share with you to entice you to grab that book. Each chapter stands alone. You can read them on their own, but together they will build you a picture. And then, remarkably, about some 8 years after I wrote that book, I felt compelled by the Lord to sit down and publish it. And I remember sitting in Raglan at someone's house looking at the harbour, and I wrote the epilogue. And it was 10 years after the main event. And I remember having some astounding reflections and revelations as I spent time with the Lord, because it was really important that I expressed honestly how Kathy and I had tried our best, but only by the grace of God had we kept our family together in such a way that is just bearing such love, joy, and fruitfulness in this season of our lives. The second confession that I do have relates to my siblings. So if any of my direct family are listening to this, then here's the honest truth. Man, it's hard to stay connected, as grown adults now in our middle age and getting older every year. It's just to stay connected, because we've all got kids, and we've all got, careers, and kids who have careers. And me and my family, we live in different parts of the world. And that's really, really difficult because of time zones, and both our parents have passed away, so there's no parental glue that is holding us together. And I just want to say this, it just takes a lot more effort, but it's really, really, really important to do this. It's really, really, really important to invest the time into staying connected to family. Oh my gosh, I've just seen the time, and I want to jump into a couple of biblical examples here rather than just use my own. I want to give you 3 or 4 different situations here. And again, because if I point you to the Bible, then my hope is that you actually go away and read it, and that maybe the living word, the Word of God with the Spirit of God, would help shape how you live your life, a life of faith, a life of purpose, and doing both of that intentionally on purpose. I want to remind you of the story of Joseph. He had an estranged relationship with his family. You talk about a complicated family. Dude had a complicated family, man. What went on with his dad, Jacob, that's a different story entirely. But then how Joseph was left for dead, taken for dead, sold to be a slave, and abandoned by his brothers. They lied to his father and said that he'd been killed. And so, complicated family story. You can read about it in the book of Genesis, beginning from about chapter 37, I think it is actually. But what I want to say is, at the end of it, Joseph pulls his brothers together, and that famous line in Genesis 50, verse 20, where he says, look, what you intended for harm, God intended for good. And he pulled the whole story together with that one statement. But I love the aspect of his story in Genesis 47, where he's bringing his brothers before Pharaoh. So they're in Egypt. He is, there's none higher than him in Egypt except the Pharaoh. But he took the lower position to become the servant of his family, to be what we would call the bigger person in the story. And he used what he had to build bridges. And there's key words here, friends. He was building bridges to restore. He was building bridges to elevate his family. He was building bridges through his humility to connect his family with God's blessing. And as I was making those notes this afternoon, I felt a really strong sense of the presence of God, the prophetic spirit of God that was speaking directly to individuals who are listening, that God is saying to you, regardless of your family history, regardless of who might be to blame for putting blood on your jacket or putting you in a hole, that God says he's calling you to a place where you build bridges, to bring people into restoration, to elevate those who must be elevated for God's purpose, and that you would reconnect people in your family with the blessing of God. Really feel the Spirit of God on that, friends. So if you want to replay that, if you want to record that, if you want to write that in your journal, but I want you to take it to the Lord. I want you to say, God, I can't do this without your grace. I can't do this without the love that you're going to give me for the people around me. Help me to make my family less complicated and help me to build a strong family. May the Lord bless you in your efforts in that area. I also, secondly, want to point you to the Apostle Paul, particularly in his letter to his friend Philemon. So you can find the book of Philemon in the middle of the New Testament. You're going to have to look hard, though, because it's only one page. It's literally only got 25 short verses, and packed in the letter, the epistle to Philemon from the Apostle Paul, is a significant demonstration of how we can untangle the complicated web that we might weave in our family in order that we could see God's love and grace flow into people's lives. So the cliff notes are, the short version of the story is, Philemon used to have a slave, and his name was Onesimus. He was poorly treated, and so Onesimus ran away. That's punishment of death, man. If you're owned by your master as a slave and you run away, man, if he tracks you down, dude's going to kill you. Anyway, Onesimus finds himself under the shadow of Paul's cloak. He becomes a student of Paul, and Paul calls him his child. What that leads us to believe is that Onesimus came to faith in Jesus Christ by being associated with the Apostle Paul and his community. And as part of Paul's role as a spiritual father, as a mentor, as a teacher, as the apostle in his life, he helped Onesimus to see that the most important place he could be was back in fellowship with Philemon, his master. Now, this is really important. He is saying to Onesimus, you've got to go back. But he's writing to Philemon and he's saying, look, you could receive him back as a slave, but I urge you to bring him into your family as a son. Receive him, Paul says, as you would receive me. If he has wronged you, charge it to my account. Man, that's powerful. What a demonstration of reconciliation and the role that we can play in reconciliation. Because, friends, I think most of the complication in our families is broken connections. And if we're going to make our family less complicated, we need to rebuild those connections. Reconciliation is how you rebuild connections, and reconciliation restores people back to God's design. So, interestingly, in my notes here, when we're making connections like this happen toward reconciliation, it actually happens through building bridges. And that's what I said with regards to Joseph and his brothers. And if you look at the letter that Paul writes to Philemon, he is building a bridge of restoration for Onesimus to walk across. And I just feel prophetically to declare across the airwaves here, broadcasting prophetically to you in this moment, that God is saying to you, be someone who builds bridges of reconciliation. Because there are people in your family that don't have the capacity to do it. Maybe they're too hurt, maybe they're too weak, maybe they're too confused, maybe they're just not connected with God in the way that you are. Be the bridge builder. Be the father or the mother, like the Apostle Paul, and speak with authority, but speak with grace. And that's a powerful place, man. Far out. Woohoo, man, I love that. Okay, I want to speak about a dude that you all know well, and not so much in the positive. Before I do speak the positive, I'll give you an example of not so positive. And that's our friend David. David in the Old Testament, David and Goliath David, King David, the man after God's own heart. The one who was the shepherd before he was a king. He was a worshipper before he was a warrior. He is the guy we need to look at because, he comes from a messed up family, man. It's my understanding that he was mistreated by his brothers because of his origin. Perhaps they didn't have the same mother. He was abandoned by his family as they went to war. He was mistreated by Saul, who became like a surrogate father to him as he was adopted into the palace. So dude was messed up, right? And so it's not surprising to see the sins of the father represented in David's life. Clearly, we have the sin with Bathsheba, the unfaithfulness, the adultery, the murder, the cover-up, and then Nathan the prophet reveals all. But then we have the sin of Amnon. One of his sons goes and rapes his half-sister Tamar. And then this tragic story leads to the exuberant public sin of another son called Absalom, who then goes and murders Amnon. It says in the Bible, 2 Samuel, that it's about repaying his brother for the rape of the sister. But then Absalom goes and discredits his father in such a public way by sleeping with the concubines of David on the wall of the palace. It's just horrific. You think Netflix is bad, man? Read the Old Testament. The point is, with regards to David's behavior, David was absent. He chose to do nothing. He wasn't confronting and setting boundaries and setting standards in the case of these two sons. And I would say that made it incredibly complex for David. What I would say, though, is he seems to turn things around with Solomon, and there's very good evidence to say that David was a spiritual role model for Solomon, urging him in his relationship with God in such a way that Solomon was, in fact, such a more successful king, not so much in battle, but in the influence that Solomon had. So talk about a legacy, but talk about a complicated legacy. So King David in the Bible brings us to the place of such awareness of what can be complicated and how we might pull ourselves out of it. So the lesson I want us to get out of this, and in fact, for your circumstance in whatever way is necessary, is do not allow these things to go unconfronted. Don't think that, if I just avoid it, I won't have the hard conversation, it'll fix itself in the end. No. The sins of the father repeat in the son. Those things that aren't brought into the light, that brought under God's grace, will become repeated problems. We see it all the time. A complicated legacy is not a good legacy. We have a final story. Just for now, we had a situation in our family just recently. We had a particularly challenging circumstance. It was pretty heavily affecting me, and by implications, it meant that everybody else in the family was dragged into it in their own ways, experiencing it in their own circumstance. But I didn't want to let it lie, and so I sent a blast to the fam chat and said, hey, look, we need a family meeting. We just need to sit down and have a chat about this because I want to make sure none of us feel like we're doing this alone. So came around for dinner, we had Sunday dinner, bottle of wine, and then without making things awkward, well, not too awkward, but just pretty honestly, I just said, look, here's a situation, here's how I see it. I want to support you in how you're journeying through this, and I want us to support each other. I do not want to be a family that hides things. I do not want to be a family that keeps secrets because they're trying to keep someone safe or protect them. I said, guys, you're not protecting me by not telling me. It wasn't judgment, it wasn't condemning. I hope it wasn't harsh. I hope it was loving. But the point that I'm sharing that for is to say, look, if we're going to make our family life uncomplicated, then we've got to think like a shepherd. We've got to raise our family well. We've got to protect our family. We've got to feed our family on good things. And that includes God's word, God's grace, God's love, and God's family. And then we've got to lead them. We've got to lead our family intentionally. And you can do that, as Joseph shows us, whether you're the father, the mother, or the son. So lead your family well by the influence that you have. I'm going to land that there. I would say that don't make your family complicated with busyness, avoidance, absence, or unspoken expectations. But perhaps go back and listen to some of the stories I've told you. Listen and read the scriptures that I've referenced, and may God speak to you in a powerful way. I look forward to coming back to you next week, and we're going to share another aspect of life that is pretty complicated, but we're going to sort it out. Take care, drink good coffee, I'll see you soon.